Many people have asked me to make a tutorial on how to draw a realistic face from start to finish. So I have created a video series where I will go through step by step on how to draw a realistic face. This video is the first part of this series where I will show you how to draw this sketch. In the next part, I will show you how to draw the skin and nose, and in total there will be 6 parts, and I will put the schedule in the description box and insert the links as I upload each video. And I will be uploading one part every week from now so that you have enough time to complete each part. And make sure to subscribe and press the bell icon so that you won't miss when I'm posting a new part of the series. And I suggest that you use the same reference photo as me the first time you're following this tutorial series, and the link will be in the description box as well. Then you can follow it one more time using your preferred reference photo, but using the same principles as I will be teaching you in every video. I think this is a great way to learn how to draw realistically using any reference photo. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say for the intro, so without further ado, let's begin making the sketch. One of the best ways to make the proportions look as accurate as possible is to use a grid. So to make a grid for our drawing, we first want to upload the reference photo on this website that will be linked in the description box. So when you're on this website, just click start and upload your reference photo, and once it's uploaded, click next. And we don't need to rotate the reference photo, so we click next. We also don't need to crop it, so we click next again. And since we are going to make the drawing in black and white, I do find it easier to make the reference photo black and white as well. So to do this, turn down the saturation by clicking this button 5 times. Then I suggest that you download it before adding the grid so that you can use a black and white reference for the next parts of this video series. And when you've done that, click next. So this is where you make the grid. So we want the lines to be black and 1 pixels. Then we want the grid dimensions to be 14 boxes wide. So after entering these settings, click Apply Grid, then click Download. Now we can open the downloaded picture. So a regular sized paper is in the size A4, and that is 21 centimeters wide. So since the grid dimensions is 14 boxes wide, we divide 14 by 21, which is 1.5 centimeters. So this means that each square that you're going to draw on your paper is going to be 1.5 centimeters wide. According to Google, that is about 0.59 inches. Then to make the squares, you are going to take your paper and use a ruler to measure and make a mark for each 1.5 centimeters on each width and length of your paper, just like I'm showing you here. And it's good to take your time on this step to ensure that the squares will be even and eventually the proportions will be more accurate. Once you have made a mark for each 1.5 centimeters on each side of the paper, you're going to connect the dots from one side to another to make the squares as I'm doing here. And keep in mind that it will be easier to erase the squares later on if you don't draw them too harshly. I'm just making them more prominent for this video so that they will show up on camera. But I suggest that you make them fine enough to erase, but also so that you can see them while drawing the outline. When we have drawn all of the squares, it's time to look at our reference photo with a grid. I think it's best to count the squares from the upper left part of the picture because some photos are very long but not wide, so maybe not everything from the reference will be captured on the paper. And as you will notice, some parts of her t-shirt will be cropped while I transfer the outline to the paper. And it's less important to include some part of the chest than the upper part of the hair. So that's basically why it's best to start from the upper left. So in the reference photo, I go to the first row of squares and count them until I get to the middle of her head, which in this case is 8 squares from left to right. So what we are doing from here is drawing what we see in each square, and some squares will be a bit trickier than others. But as you can see, it's still rather easy to get accurate proportions using this method, as we only have to focus on one small area at a time. Just make sure to keep track on which square you're working on. Sometimes you have to count multiple times just to make sure that you are working in the correct square. It may sound more difficult than it actually is, but once you get the hang of it, you will be able to do this quicker each time. Also remember that if you want to make a realistic drawing, it takes a bit more time because you have to pay more attention to the details. It usually takes me about an hour to make the sketch, so don't stress, you have enough time to do this. I also want to point out that when I get to the hair, I may not always draw every single piece of hair exactly as in the reference, but more approximately. Because when you see so many squares all at once, it can sometimes be difficult to keep up with exactly which square you're working on, especially in the hair where every hair goes in so many different directions. And yeah, I would say these squares are more important to use for the outline of the facial features, the head and the neck and so on. But how each strand of hair is lying in the picture is less important unless you want it to be absolutely perfect. So don't beat yourself up if you can't get it exactly the way you want it to. And as I said, you want to be more careful when drawing the facial features and try to get them right, but it's also not completely necessary to get it exactly correct. In fact, it may be quite impossible to draw every single thing in the exact same place as in the reference photo. But as I mentioned, this method will still be great to get as accurate proportions as possible because we're only working on one square at a time. As you can see, now that we are at the lower part of the drawing, some part of her t-shirt is cropped out, and this is because when we make the grid on the photo, we only take the width of the photo into account, not the length. So after we have finished making the outline and we think everything looks okay, we have to erase the squares. I think it's best to use a kneaded eraser because they just erase everything so much better than a regular eraser, in my opinion. And you can also shape it into any size you want. But if you don't have a kneaded eraser on hand, a regular eraser works fine too. But if you're really serious about drawing, I would highly recommend you to get a kneaded eraser because they are amazing. As you also can see, I have a paper under my hand while I'm doing this, and this is because I don't want to transfer any potential oils that could be on my hand to the paper, as this can make the blending more difficult when we draw the skin later on. So this is quite important, and I would suggest you to have a paper under your hand as well. And while you are erasing the squares, if you notice that you want to add some lines to the outline, just go ahead and do that, preferably before erasing any squares around that area. Because sometimes we think we are done and we start to erase, but then we notice that we just want to add something, and yeah, that's completely fine. And after you are done erasing the squares, you can fill in some of the outlines if you accidentally erased some of them. Otherwise, you are done with the sketch. You may find that it looks a bit weird at first, but as we will make the drawing come to life in the upcoming episodes, it will look much better. So yeah, this was all for this part of the series. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something from it. And please leave a like if it was helpful for you, and don't forget to subscribe for the upcoming parts. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video.